Marble Mountain is a series where we explore the entire map. It's not just about building one big city, it's about the environment and all the little places around it. The towns, the industry, the farmland, the people, the places, the built and the natural, and how they all interconnect. But that's not to say that there isn't going to be a big city. In the original Marble Mountain series, the big city was Montana. And that's where we're going to start building today. The original version was built and started very, very poorly. This time round, let's start the city a little bit more realistically. Rooting the city in a little bit of history, thinking about our industrial focus, taking some more influence from the environment, whilst also taking influence from real life cities. We do also need to stay faithful to where it all began. Welcome back to Marble Mountain. Attempt number 3, I guess you could call it, minus Oakwood. That'll be back at some point, but we do have some new additions, some waves, some ocean life. I've made some changes to the map, and we've also got some planes going over. So some good things have happened and some good changes, and I'm really keen to start building out Montana. But on that, are we going to call it Montana? I mean, this is essentially the same city as before, but I am going to be obviously building it quite differently, taking inspiration from it, but then other places, real life places. And I suggest the name change because I was never that keen on the name in the first place. So I'm just going to put it out there. Do we call it something different? Do you have any other name suggestions, or do we have to stick to it? We probably have to stick to it. But on those other cities of inspiration, we are obviously looking at San Francisco, but I don't want to look at current day San Francisco, at least for today. Instead, I want to think about San Francisco back before the Bay Bridge, maybe like 1930s, and I'm thinking about that because I'm looking at the layout of the city, I'm looking at these little roads, the industry around the waterways, the lack of highways, the lack of tall skyscrapers. Everything is nice and small. I mean, it's still pretty sprawly, but you get the idea. I don't want to think too much about this place as a modern city, but then of course, I'm not starting in the 1930s. You know, we're not going to progress like that. I just want to keep that in mind. And with that in mind, let's get started. I am just thinking about these establishing roads, which is not an official term, it's more or less what I call these things, but the roads that are leading into our city and are kind of like the catalyst for the rest of the grid layout. As you can see down here, you can see how we have like an influence from these main roads coming in. These are pointing in the direction of this waterfront, which is going to be all full of industry. I am somewhat influenced by the topography, but I will absolutely change the landscape as I think about where that road network is going to go and how I want the city to look. So it'll be absolutely something that happens at the same time. And I say that because over here, I've added this hillside in just so we can have a nice little bend with this road that comes into the city. And I have also changed the direction of this road because we actually have a bit of a valley. So I feel like that's a nice little angle to take. But for the rest of it, you know, it gets pretty wobbly in certain parts. And I would like the layout of this city to not be like too rigid. So I like a bit of this and I like a bit of this, but I reckon we might get a bit, you know, all over the place around here. Now, you can see influences from San Francisco, but San Francisco is a place that absolutely does not respect the topography. And I have to admit, I do kind of respect their lack of respect, but I would like to maybe take a bit more influence from Los Angeles, where it is a little bit wobblier, a little bit less even, and you can see the influences creeping into the layout. I mentioned industry around here, and industry is going to need some pretty solid roads. So rather than messing around with any of these little guys, I am going to dive straight into a fairly large avenue. I think for a realistic waterfront, you need to get pretty close to the water's edge. This is still pretty high up, and in City Skylines terms, that is a pretty standard height difference, but I personally think that you're going to get really nice and close. So this avenue is going to be pretty substantial. It's going to be a major part of our city, and that's the reason why I am dragging it out now. Right about now, the headcanon for me is I am creating this thing for industry, and what's going to be the backbone of getting industry and cargo and all the stuff that we're going to need for the city. That's going to be like the reasoning why this is so large. But of course, down the track, this is going to be more as a tourist destination, a place of business, a place of leisure. We'll have parks and probably some residents around here. And I'll probably do a bit of that today as well. But for now, I'm imagining that this is more for industry. Ooh, and I was actually really hoping for something like this where these two roads meet. I think I'm just gonna go and straight up make these into two one-way roads. And then now that the roads are down, I am going to use Move It to iron out some of this layout. I do still want some bumps, and I do still want there to be a bit of wonkiness to the height difference, but it could definitely use a bit of ironing out. So I'm just going to go through and make some adjustments, especially before we start zoning. Alright, so this is now the layout, and I am feeling pretty happy with it. There are a couple of things that we will continue to tinker with, but as a whole, I am feeling pretty happy and really excited to start seeing people move in because I think it's going to work pretty well. So essentially, I have just reworked a bit of this avenue that is going to connect up all the wharves around here, and now they flow into this section, which is two one-way roads, and they're going to go all the way up and connect to the bridge. This is just a bit temporary as I would like to rework all of this, but for now, that does give me a good idea of where I can start dragging out a bit of this grid and think about where some other bits and pieces can sit around that beach. But with the roads down, let's now put them to the test and get some people moved in. Let's get these guys some power and water. I am going to unlock this section over here. I've made this map with a bunch of these reservoirs all over the place, so I am going to tap into the underground water source, and I think just to kind of give it a bit more of a realistic appearance, I reckon up here looks pretty good. And I'm kind of disappointed because I expected to have a bunch of wind up here. I mean, we are sitting up on a hillside, a bit of a mountainside, but nothing. Okay, so apparently the top of Marble Mountain does. I'm not going to do that. A wind farm in this location is a bit of a non-negotiable for me. It was part of the original Marble Mountain, so it kind of has to be part of this one too. So I'm going to do something that, I don't know, maybe is a little bit silly, but I am going to build one anyway. They are barely turning, but somehow are producing electricity, so I will take that as a bit of a win. When they eventually fail, which they absolutely will, I will upgrade it with an electricity service block, and I think I can actually upgrade this to act more like a power supply that, you know, I'd expect from something like this. I'm going to dedicate all this section for that low density demand because this is going to be pretty endless. So I reckon keeping the sprawl going this way makes a lot of sense. But then for our industrial demand, I reckon we should eat into some of this water and establish some fishing industry, which I think we'll specialize in for a little while. And I might have plans to redo all this section, but for a fishing industry, I reckon we're going to keep this pretty much exactly the same. I reckon we dive straight into the detail work. Way, alright, that is a pretty big chunk of fishing industry. Probably a little bit larger than I expected, but I think it's going to work out in our favor because I like the fact that this is our specialization. We're going to expand upon it. I don't really plan to build too many more of the actual facilities themselves. I like the fact that I am already expanding on it, even though we don't really need all this cold storage. I think it works in terms of the storyline of Marble Mountain and how this is the part of the shorefront that is dedicated to fishing, and you know, I'm not just like placing random storage facilities, which I was about to do. I was just gonna place a bunch of warehouses, but this is great. I love that it's all connected up, and we've got a bit of a generous amount of space to play with, so I can in fact add a few more. And I am using Anarchy, so I believe I can actually just build more of them outside of it too. And all this is still pretty under detailed. I will place a bunch of trucks around here and we'll get some fishing boats just parked alongside that wharf and other little props and stuff, but we'll do all that a little bit later. I have also gone through and just added in some shops. These are all the waterfront businesses. I am still playing around and figuring out what they look like, and I think some of them work, but I do plan to get back down here and maybe even change some of them up. But yeah, I do plan to build a lot more green space around here. I think that's what I like about fishing industry and how it works in the game as well. It is not noisy and it's not very polluted, which means that it does kind of double up as a nice space for potential parks around it and some green areas. And that's kind of the same for real life. You know, these areas are kind of nice, a bit scenic, and around the waterfront, I think that this is going to be a pretty neat little area. I am taking inspiration from this little spot within San Francisco, and I think you can see all the references that I've spliced into it. But something else is this is also the second time that I've built something like this and inspired by the same spot, because I did also build the same sort of fishing industry within the original Marble Mountain. So it's kind of cool that we're revisiting the same area with the same industry. However, there's no point building all this if it's actually not going to operate. So let's connect this thing up. I'm going to utilize all this space, just like before. Alright, I might have gone a little bit overboard with the amount of fishing areas, but I just want to see how overpowered I can make this thing. It'd be fun to see it level up a lot, but the problem that I'm having right now is we are getting a little bit of a traffic jam. You can see that all these boats are just getting stuck behind each other. If I click on individual boats, you can see they're going to different docks. So I wonder if rather than having to go all the way back through this section, maybe we can like bypass it with some extra lines. I do like the fact that you can create these waypoints so they can take slightly different routes coming into all of this area, but is that going to help? That's the question. While we wait for that to take effect, I'm going to continue our cold storage into this area. I'm going to use Anarchy to be able to place these things over here. We don't need it just yet, but I do anticipate a lot of fishing taking place. Just for now, I am keeping these piers very, very simple. I am going to change the color so that they all match. Oh, that's nice. But yeah, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to do any detail on this at the very moment. I kind of just want to get it all in place and then we'll dive into a bunch more detail. But I am really happy with the fact that we are actually making pretty good profit from this place. I have made some improvements with our this whole network is kind of wild, but I think it's actually doing wonders. We are seeing better flow. There is some traffic jam, but it's so fine. You can already see we are on the way up to hitting our limit, so I will continue to add more storage. I think I might continue to add more wharves, just like that. But I think before I do, I should probably tackle a bit of this happiness. Well, I guess lack of happiness, I can make some really easy changes by adding in a police station. We could use some education. Or get a little fire station in. I will add a couple of parks and plazas for good measure. And that's already made a pretty big improvement to the citizens' happiness, but then also the way that everything's starting to look. We've got a bit more detail, some more places that feel more polished and more set in stone. The types of buildings that I've chosen are a little bit more historical. This is a police station from the German pack, and I reckon it fits in really well within this setting, especially within this corner. Buildings that are a bit more historical and are going to last the test of time. And I've also started to place down buildings manually just to get a good idea of how things are going to look when the city begins to expand, and we are beginning to expand, which is great. But what's letting us down at the moment is the lack of residents and the lack of industry. At least financially, we need both those things. We've got plenty of vacant blocks and plenty of room to zone, but I am going to purchase more land because I do think I need to reconsider our zoning. Originally, downtown was going to be around here, but I'm going to shuffle it back to this block over here. And if this is where the downtown's going to sit, then I reckon this is probably a little bit too close for single family housing. So I've just zoned all of this area with single family housing. I will go back and change a bit of it and, plop down buildings because this is not going to zone very nicely. It's just a bit temporary. But what is not that temporary, and I say not that temporary because I'll just see how things change as we develop the city, but I decided to place down all of these growbles. This neighborhood is inspired by this area of San Francisco, and what I like about this is this area is going to be a lot more greener with some larger backyards, definitely compared to the rest of the city, especially so close to the downtown. So I will probably just dedicate this block for, taking inspiration from that area, but we don't really have backyards here. The types of buildings that I wanted to choose just didn't really have very much, but that's okay, because I think we'll make some. And I think the key to something like this is not getting too hung up on detail, like they're gonna get a bit wonky in places, and I'm sure there's gonna be some imperfections, but I will do my best at covering up any of those imperfections with some trees. And that's all the neighborhood needed, just a bit of greenery, some trees, and some fences. Not going to overthink it. But what's happening now is this is a nicely detailed neighborhood, but the rest of it is looking a little bit patchy. But that's okay, because I reckon we can fill a lot of these spaces with some low density housing. We do have a lot of industrial demand that I think we need to lock in on Frank's Fish Stick Factory is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. A bit of a mouthful to say, kind of like the name to be honest, and it is a level 2 now, which is wonderful. Making loads of money. Great, but we do need to hone in on some more industry. For this, I'm gonna buy an extra block of land over here. With the wind blowing in this direction, I think it's pretty safe to zone a whole bunch of industry all along the shorefront here. And then I reckon we make all this section over here dedicated to industry. We can make this a bit of a port. It might be kind of fun to do like a little port here and have a bunch of industry, which is just a bit of a placeholder while I figure out what this is going to look like. But I am thinking about what Mission Bay in San Francisco was like before it was all residential. You can see the bones of what it used to look like, but back in the day, this was all industry and there was even a train yard here. So I don't know, that kind of ticks a lot of boxes for me. So I think at the moment I'm going to turn this into industry, and we'll have to think about what this could look like in the future. But I reckon this does give us a bit of an excuse to use another drawbridge. I'm going to remove this corner of industry that I just zoned because it is a bit awkward, and I think this is a good size to put in a bit of a temporary port. Basic, basic, basic. Don't look too much into how this looks because it is absolutely going to change. At this very moment, I am just placing down a bunch of stuff to get an idea of where they could go in the future. And this is where this could go in the future. It's going to be pretty tight, but I think we can make it. And that's not too bad. And what I will say is the idea behind this port is to make it extremely small. Like, I'm gonna have to try and find a way, and I might even have to rely on some mods or some custom assets to make a more custom one that is going to act more as like a little port. I don't love the fact there's a crane here. I would prefer it not to have a crane. So if you have any ideas, please let me know, because I don't love the fact that this is looking like a large port. So I will just turn him down to a small one. And as I do that, I am actually just thinking about, and this would be for a future episode, but maybe instead we don't use a port, and instead we go for some more fishing industry, and we just use a large boat like this. Just an idea. What do you reckon? And I think that the space between the two roads on either side of this waterway is just a little bit too narrow, because dragging that out like that, we've got a little bit of craziness. So I might have to delete that. Rather than connecting to this road down here, I think instead he will go over the top. I mean, that's essentially what I want. I want to see these drawbridges in action, and I'm pretty happy just seeing the one, this little guy who's about to close on our ship. Okay. Let's just ignore that. But what this is going to do is this is going to hopefully ease a bit of that traffic, because that was a complaint from our residents. So that might improve that a little bit. But what I'm noticing is there are still so many gaps within our city. And I feel like to get this place truly established, I really need to make it look a little bit more complete. I'm going to start with this headland and dedicate all of this for some green space, some nice little windy paths, and maybe even a lighthouse. And just like with the port, a lot of this is just a general idea of where I want a park like this to go. This is definitely not set in stone, but I do like where it sits and I'll definitely continue to work on it. In fact, I'll come back down here and give it a really big makeover. But for now, I am just going to add one more addition. I'll put a large lighthouse right there. And with that done, let's finish off this build by fulfilling a bit of that residential demand. We'll get this downtown zoned out and give the city some much needed detail. And that, my friends, is a lot of change. I have been chipping away at this over the weekend, just filling in some gaps and working on some detail, and I am pretty stoked with how things are starting to turn out. There are still obviously some gaps and some places we do need to continue on, but that is entirely the point. This was not meant to be a complete build. This is very much getting us set up for the future. And in terms of getting us ready for the future, it's mostly about the roads, it's mostly about where things go and the general idea of where the city is going to eventually sprawl. But that's not to say that everything down here is on the chopping block, because I did also place down a bunch of things that I feel like could be a staple. So for instance, the downtown, which is looking incredibly patchy, I have added in a lot of buildings that have definitely stood the test of time. You can see how other buildings could have existed around them at some point in time, but you might also tell that this is a very sad looking downtown. But that is so fine in my opinion, because I would like to get down here and truly flesh it out. Like, if you imagine there is eventually going to be tall skyscrapers and large buildings and more historical buildings when I can actually afford them. We've got no town hall, we've got nothing in terms of government buildings. It is about as bare bones as it can get. But I reckon this is a pretty good start, at least for episode 1. And there are areas that I really like. I am totally using these buildings in another place, but this is very much on the chopping block. This is where I'm thinking about building more of the downtown. And you know, at some point there's gonna be interchanges and highways and rail lines and just sprawl. So something like this fits in right now, and it's a very easy just place down and just see how it goes. And it's going all right, but yeah, it's totally on the chopping block. And that is the beauty in building like this. But at the end of the day, it does still complete the city. And speaking of completing the city, nothing quite does that like farms. This is such a easy way of just like filling gaps around the fringes of your town or of your city, and it is just so easy. In fact, a lot of this isn't even functional. And I've done that on purpose because I feel like I can't really justify building in areas that I don't technically own. I know I've dragged out roads, but think of them more as, you know, filling in some gaps and like scenery. This is all scenery, but around here, the ones that do work, they look great. But around here, I have just gone through and added in some surfaces, and I am using a bunch more surfaces. They are so powerful and I absolutely love them. And I've even gone through and added in a bunch around the edges of the city, just adding in a little bit of green, because of course the city is a lot greener than its environment. And the whole reason why I've made the map theme like this is I don't really want bright green grass around areas like this. This is supposed to be nature. You don't really see that much green grass like that. You know, it really depends on whereabouts you are in the world, but somewhere like this, I think that this works great. So I've been going around and just adding in bits of grass around here, just slightly greener, and I will continue to do so around here when we detail it up at a later stage. But I tell you what, surfaces add just tons to your city, and I am really loving the way that this is starting to look. But it's not all great. We do have a bunch of problems starting to creep up. Noise pollution is going to be a bit of an issue for this area of the city, so we will have to tackle that in the next episode. I have also got a bit of a traffic situation going on, which is understandable. We have zero public transport, and these roads are a little bit more reflective of old roads that have been here for a long time. So we've got, a lot of connections where we don't really need intersections, and crosswalks where we don't really need crosswalks. So I will go through and continue to work on that, but that is kind of the beauty of all this. I've added in all these docks and changed the port to be fishing now. I still don't know if I love it, but again, all this stuff is on the chopping block. They are all just ideas of where things can go, and definitely a much better way of beginning a city than how Montana first originated back in City Skylines 1. So I think that this is a pretty good start and a lot of fun ideas to play around with and to continue and to flesh out. And just imagine when this place grows and grows and just sprawls into the far off region. Oh man, it's just gonna be so much fun. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode of Marble Mountain. It is very much appreciated. I have really enjoyed reimagining Montana and taking more inspiration from the cities that I am taking inspiration from, because originally I didn't in the original Marble Mountain series. So it's kind of fun to see how things change, and it's going to be a lot of fun watching Montana change over the coming episodes. But until then, have a great week, and I want to give a special shout out to my beloved patrons and YouTube members for making videos like this possible. Axaris, Samuel Stelzer, Rixo12, Christopher Wren, Damo C, Nick Serafleen, Patrick Landelt, Charlie Zane, Sully, Victor Bajorklin, and Dexter Batts. Cheers legends, catch you on the next one. See ya.